Welcome to Have You Read It, the channel where we bring books to life, one summary at a time. Whether you're here for self-help, personal growth, or business inspiration, there's something for everyone. Today, we're diving into The Art of Strategy, a game theorist's guide to success in business and life, by Avinash K. Dixit and Barry J. Nalebuff. This book is a revised and updated version of their earlier work, Thinking Strategically, and it aims to equip you with the tools of game theory to navigate the strategic landscape of your life. It's not just for business whizzes, but for anyone who makes decisions, from CEOs to parents, athletes to politicians. The core idea is that we're all strategists, whether we realize it or not, and it's better to be a good one. The book emphasizes the importance of understanding not just your own goals, but also the goals and potential actions of those you interact with. This applies to competitive situations, where the goal is often to outdo your adversary, but just as importantly to cooperative scenarios where figuring out how to collaborate effectively, even with self-interested individuals, can lead to win-win outcomes. The authors start with 10 intriguing tales of strategy that highlight different aspects of game theory in action. These stories offer a glimpse of how strategic thinking can be applied in diverse situations. One tale, for example, has you trying to guess a number between 1 and 100. If the number was chosen randomly, the best strategy is to divide the interval in half with each guess. But if the number is chosen by someone who wants you to guess wrong, because they have to pay you if you guess right, then you need to anticipate their intentions and adjust your guesses accordingly. This simple game illustrates the core principle of game theory. Put yourself in the other player's shoes. Another tale looks at how Richard Hatch, the first winner of the TV show Survivor, used strategic thinking to win the final immunity challenge by losing it. Hatch recognized that his best chance of winning the overall game was to go up against Kelly Wigglesworth in the final two. By stepping down from the immunity challenge, he allowed Kelly to eliminate their more popular rival, Rudy Boesch, and select Hatch as her opponent in the finals. Hatch correctly anticipated Kelly's choice and Rudy's swing vote and secured the $1 million prize. The book also looks at strategic decision-making in business, such as sailboat racing, where the leader typically imitates the follower. Why? Because only winning matters. If you're ahead, the safest way to stay ahead is to copy your opponent's moves, even if they seem suboptimal. In contrast, those who trail are more likely to take risks and try innovative strategies. The same dynamic holds in many other competitive situations, such as the development of new technologies. Another theme is how seemingly irrational behavior, such as Martin Luther's stubborn refusal to recant his views, "Here I stand, I cannot do otherwise," or Charles de Gaulle's intransigence in international negotiations, can create strategic advantages. By taking a firm, irrevocable position, they left the other parties with only two choices: accept or abandon the negotiation. This gave them considerable leverage. One of the more surprising lessons is that sometimes we do better by cutting off options. In the ABC primetime show, Life, the Game, the dieters agreed to be photographed in bikinis. These photos would be broadcast on national TV if they failed to lose the required weight. This seemingly drastic measure worked because it changed the incentives for their future selves. By limiting their future options, they increased the likelihood of achieving their goal. This is similar to Odysseus tying himself to the mast to avoid succumbing to the siren's song, or Cortés scuttling his ships upon arriving in Mexico. By making defeat worse, Cortés increased his soldiers' commitment to victory. The Art of Strategy also discusses the prisoner's dilemma, a situation where individual self-interest leads to a collectively undesirable outcome. The classic example has two suspects being interrogated separately. Each has an incentive to confess, even if they're both innocent, leading to a worse outcome for both than if they had both kept quiet. This dilemma arises in many situations, from price wars between businesses to overfishing to the arms race. The challenge is to find ways to encourage cooperation, even when others are motivated by self-interest. Warren Buffett's campaign finance reform proposal provides a twist on the prisoner's dilemma, where a billionaire offers to donate $1 billion to whichever party delivers the most votes to get the reform passed. Both parties, recognizing that delivering the money to the opposition would be a disaster, end up supporting the bill. The book discusses different ways to resolve these kinds of dilemmas, including repeated interactions, reputation effects, and the possibility of punishments. An important lesson is that it is not enough to play the game well. You have to play the right game. Sometimes, as in the rock, paper, scissors game used to determine which auction house would sell Takashi Hashiyama's art collection, the very structure of the game can lead to suboptimal outcomes. While game theory can help you play any given game more effectively, it also teaches you how to design and choose games that better serve your overall interests. The book then shifts its focus from the art of strategy to the science, introducing the tools of game theory more systematically. A key tool for analyzing sequential games, where players make alternating moves, is backward reasoning. The authors illustrate this concept with the 21 Flags game from the TV show Survivor. Two teams take turns removing flags from a field. Each team can remove 1, 2, or 3 flags at a time, and the team to take the last flag wins. By working backward from the end of the game, it's possible to determine the optimal strategy for any number of remaining flags. The book continues to build on this principle of backward reasoning, using examples like the line-item veto game, where it is shown that having more options can sometimes make you worse off. The possibility of the president vetoing individual items in the budget influences Congress's strategies in proposing the budget, which can lead to a worse outcome for the president than if he didn't have the veto power at all. In some games, especially those that are played only once, such as a penalty kick in soccer, it is advantageous to be unpredictable. The book introduces the concept of mixed strategies, where players deliberately randomize their choices to avoid being predictable. A soccer kicker shouldn't always kick to the goalie's left or right. Instead, he should mix his kicks in a way that makes it impossible for the goalie to anticipate his choice. The book shows how to calculate the optimal mix in such zero-sum games, where one player's gain is the other's loss. It points out that even when you are randomizing correctly, you might still lose, especially when the chances of winning on any one trial are small. The authors use the example of American football, where a run up the middle on 3rd down with only 1 yard to go is the percentage play. However, the offense has to throw an occasional bomb to keep the defense honest. The fact that these risky passes sometimes fail does not mean that mixing is a bad idea. In fact, the run up the middle remains such a high percentage play precisely because the defense must divert some resources to guard against the bomb. The next chapters introduce the concept of Nash equilibrium. In a Nash equilibrium, each player chooses the strategy that best serves his or her own interest, given the strategies chosen by the other players. If everyone is playing a best response to what they believe the others are doing, and everyone is right in their beliefs, then no one has any incentive to change their strategy unilaterally. The authors illustrate Nash equilibrium with a variety of examples, including the pricing game between two mail-order firms, Rainbow's End and BB Lean. Each firm has to set the price for a particular shirt in its winter catalog without knowing the other's price. By analyzing the payoffs in a game table, the authors show that the Nash equilibrium has both firms charging a relatively low price, even though they would both have done better if they had both charged a higher price. This is another example of the prisoner's dilemma. The book introduces several methods for finding Nash equilibria, including successive elimination of dominated strategies, where a strategy is dominated if there's another strategy that always does better, regardless of what the other players do. The idea is that rational players won't choose a dominated strategy, so we can eliminate them from consideration when looking for an equilibrium. Not every game has a unique Nash equilibrium. The authors examine games with multiple equilibria, such as the coordination game where two Stone Age hunters, Fred and Barney, have to decide whether to hunt stag or bison without being able to communicate with each other. If they both go to the same hunting ground, they get a large payoff. If they go to different grounds, they get nothing. This game has two Nash equilibria, both hunt stag or both hunt bison. The challenge is to coordinate their choices without being able to communicate directly. This leads to the concept of focal points, developed by Thomas Schelling. A focal point is an equilibrium that stands out in some way. It might be based on cultural norms, past experience, or simply the salience of a particular option. For example, if two strangers are told to meet in New York City on a specific day, a likely focal point would be noon at Grand Central Station or Times Square. The authors also examine games with conflicting interests, such as the Battle of the Sexes and the Game of Chicken. In the Battle of the Sexes, a husband and wife have different preferences for movies, but they'd both rather see a movie together than alone. This game has two Nash equilibria, each corresponding to one player's preferred outcome. The challenge is to find a way to select one of the equilibria. In Chicken, two teenagers drive their cars toward each other. The first to swerve is the chicken. This game also has two equilibria, but if each player tries to achieve his preferred equilibrium, they crash. The book then turns to the important issue of credibility in strategic moves. How can you convince others to do what you want, especially when your threats or promises aren't in your interest to carry out once the other side has moved? The book provides 8 different paths to credibility, each illustrated with real-life examples. One approach is to use contracts to back up your resolve. Another is to establish a reputation for following through on your commitments, so that others will believe you in the future. A more drastic approach is to burn bridges behind you, making it impossible to back down. Cortez's decision to scuttle his ships upon arriving in Mexico is a dramatic example. By eliminating the option of retreat, he increased his soldiers' commitment to victory. Other strategies include cutting off communication to avoid renegotiation, leaving the outcome to chance, or at least appearing to do so, moving in small steps to build trust, developing credibility through teamwork, or employing mandated agents, such as lawyers or union negotiators who are committed to carrying out your instructions. The book concludes by exploring several specific types of strategic situations, including auctions, bargaining, voting, and the design of incentives. In auctions, a key concept is the winner's curse. The person who wins the auction is the one who most overestimated the value of the item being sold. Thus, winning can be bad news. To avoid being cursed, you should always bid as if you've won. Assume that all of the other bidders are somewhere below your bid, and given that you've won, ask yourself if you are still happy at this price. The book looks at different types of auctions, such as the English auction where the price ascends and the Dutch auction where the price descends, and shows how game theory can help you determine the optimal bidding strategy in each. It also introduces the Vickrey auction, a sealed bid auction where the winner pays the second highest bid, and shows that in this type of auction, bidding your true valuation is a dominant strategy. The revenue equivalence theorem, one of the most remarkable results in auction theory, is discussed. The sources suggest that under certain conditions, private values, symmetric bidders, the seller makes the same amount of money on average, regardless of whether the auction type is English, Vickrey, Dutch, or sealed bid. This is because bidders adapt their strategies to the rules of the game, often offsetting the intended effects of the auction design. The book explores a variety of games that might seem at first to be unrelated to auctions, but can be analyzed using similar principles, such as the preemption game, where two companies race to launch a new product, and the war of attrition, where two companies engage in a costly battle to drive each other out of the market. In bargaining, the book introduces the concept of BATNA, best alternative to a negotiated agreement, which is what you can get if you don't reach an agreement with the other side. A key principle is that the size of the bargaining pie should be measured by how much value an agreement creates, compared to what you could have got with no agreement. By focusing on the value created by an agreement, both sides can identify opportunities for mutual gain. The book also analyzes the role of brinkmanship in bargaining, where one side takes a risk of a mutually undesirable outcome, such as a strike to gain a larger share of the pie. Brinkmanship is a double-edged sword. It can be effective, but it can also lead to a breakdown of the negotiation. In voting, the book examines the strategic issues that arise when there are 3 or more candidates. Voters often have an incentive to vote strategically for a second or third choice who is a more viable candidate, rather than vote honestly for their most preferred candidate. The book discusses the paradoxical properties of majority rule, where cycles can arise. Candidate A beats B, B beats C, but C beats A, making it impossible to identify a clear winner. The book looks at alternative voting systems, such as approval voting, where voters can vote for as many candidates as they wish, and the Condorcet method, where the candidate who wins all pairwise contests is declared the winner, and discusses the advantages and disadvantages of each. It examines how the order of voting can determine the outcome of a decision, even when majority rule is used. The final chapter focuses on the design of incentives. How can you motivate others to do what you want, especially when you can't directly observe their effort? The book discusses the trade-offs between carrots and sticks, linear and nonlinear incentive schemes, and the importance of aligning incentives with the overall goals of the organization. It also examines the challenges of designing incentive schemes in hierarchical organizations and in situations with multiple owners or tasks. It explains the idea of the efficiency wage. In many cases, employers offer a wage above that workers could get elsewhere, since the risk of losing the premium is enough to discourage them from cheating. In conclusion, The Art of Strategy provides a comprehensive and engaging introduction to the principles of game theory and shows how they can be applied in a wide range of situations. The key takeaway is that everything is a game, and it's better to be a good strategist than a bad one. Here are a few easy-to-remember heuristics. Put yourself in the other player's shoes. Anticipate their goals and how they might react to your actions. Look forward and reason backward. In sequential games, work backward from the end of the game to determine your best strategy at each stage. If you have a dominant strategy, use it. A dominant strategy always does better than any other strategy, regardless of what the other players do. Look for equilibria. In simultaneous games, try to find a set of strategies where everyone is playing a best response to everyone else and no one has an incentive to deviate. Make your strategic moves credible. Use commitments, threats, or promises, and find ways to make them believable. Remember, there's always a larger game. Sometimes changing the game you are playing is the best strategy of all. Thanks for watching. Have you read it? Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button so you never miss our next book dive.